Good afternoon. It is Monday, June 26, 2023, and I call to order this work session for the Wayzata Public Schools Board of Education or School Board. We'll go around the table for introductions.
Linda Cohen.
Stacy Box, Heidi Cater,
Dana
Miller, Sheila Fryer,
Cheryl Posey.
Dee Caring.
Bonita Leckie.
Faith Sanders.
Hey, welcome everyone. We have a really interesting agenda for this work session this afternoon, and it begins with some teaching and learning reports and a QComp. And so I'll turn it over to Dana Miller, our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, to introduce our guests.
Awesome. Thank you, Madam Chair, Superintendent Anderson, members of the board. This is our annual QComp report today. You did have access to a full length report. We're just going to be highlighting a brief overview today, specifically around our peer coach program, which has undergone some changes this year. And so see if we get that slideshow up, but I'll just keep rolling until that sounds. So the second slide there is our professional learning visual that we use with our four core components of professional learning, reflecting into action in the middle, and that is what has guided all of our QComp work this year. And so with that, I'm going to graciously turn it over to Director Solveig Herde, our Director of Equity and Inclusion, and she's going to speak to the collaboration of this work, which is one of the changes that we've been bringing forward. So Solveig and team.
Yeah. Thank you, Dana. So yes, I'm Solveig Herde, Director of Equity and Inclusion, and I'm actually also a past peer coach in the district, and in the Equity and Inclusion department with me is Becky Hiddleston, also a past peer coach. And as we've been moving forward in our district, we really have wanted things to be extremely integrated and connected. Equity and inclusion is practices around teaching and learning. And so if we go to the second slide where you see our professional learning vision, a lot of these themes are things that have been our work emerging over years in regards to what it means to really create excellence for each and every student. And so this entire oval that highlights our professional learning focuses in Wayzata, which has reflecting into action at the core, very much speaks to our peer coach program. It also though speaks to the collaboration between teaching and learning and equity and inclusion. As many of you maybe are familiar, we have an image that is in oval that says "We're all in," that is part of our branded work for equity and inclusion. And this professional learning vision was very intentionally designed to have that oval and that image at the core and foundation of it, because it is the foundation of all the work that we do. And so as part of all of that, Becky and I have been so fortunate to collaborate with an amazing team of peer coaches this year in really moving things forward for our teachers and therefore for our students. And so we have a team here that I'm going to let all of them introduce themselves and the building that they've supported. And then we'll dig in hearing a bit more about the program this year.
Okay, well, I'm Michelle Hall, and right now, this past year, I supported the buildings.
Lindsay Duncan, I supported the elementary, Northwoods, and East Coastal.
And we have Jessica.
I'm Jessica Cricky. I'm a kindergarten teacher at Sunset Hill.
She'll be also able to share about the experience of the coaching program this year. Great. To the next slide.
All right, so thank you for having us. And tonight we're going to have an opportunity to look at this graphic a little bit more in detail. The far right here level of data is the most concrete part of this as far as explanation, and maybe feels like something we've had a lot of conversation around this year. So when we think about the levels that we're looking at, whether peer coaching or across the district, we're thinking about our satellite data, thinking about systems data, big data. We've been getting a little more localized at the next level with map data or survey data. And this data allows us to know a little bit more like assessment, for example, and thinking more about what our students need from us as school staff. And then finally, there's data that we get in everyday interactions with students, and that's the street level data. All right, so in the spring, staff that engage in the peer coaching process throughout the school year take a survey, and that survey gives us feedback about our time together and about our work throughout the school year. And so that's where the context for these folks come from. We wanted to to give you that. Many educators this year, we had the privilege actually of talking with some of you about the work that educators were doing to align their peer code work, SMART goals, and then align those with the student experience goals, and offering that street data, those student experiences that they're collecting data around. So these quotes themselves are taken directly from the survey. And I'm going to ask, would someone sitting here at the table be willing to read those two quotes for us today? Thank you.
Think about different and diverse ways to meet all of my students' needs. Second is receive genuine feedback regarding my interactions with students and use this information to enhance student experience.
Thank you. Yeah, so again, the impact of peer coaching on just the ways in which staff were relating that to the benefits, and what they took away was confidential conversations with another educator around student experience.
All right, and then continuing with the graphic, so now we're going to highlight asset framing. So asset framing is key for peer coaching and our partnership with educators to meet diverse student needs. It's an opportunity to reframe how we approach each and every student. And then the next slide, we have some quotes here. So an asset framing mindset is multi-layered as peer coaches support teachers in identifying and growing their strengths through personalized professional learning and supporting teachers and PLCs in identifying, celebrating, and developing the assets of all students. This includes viewing assessment results and street level data to further learning. So if I could have a couple volunteer, or one person could use both of those. Again, we could have another volunteer. We want to get you involved.
Take a chance on being me, try new things, be honest about areas of my practice I want to improve and need help with. I value the extra perspective and conversations that will push me out of my comfort zone. And then the second quote says, think and talk through adjustments with someone who's not making judgments, but helping me frame situations in a positive way. The conversations are best when the peer coach feels open to point out what went well or how students were reacting or sharing conversations that I missed.
All right, so that asset framing piece is, we spent so much time just as staff to talking about our students and our families, and to take this as the peer coach part of it and thinking about how we're working with teachers as well. So, all right, and then the next slide. So now highlighting professional learning communities. Also known as PLCs, which I think you're all very familiar with. So as peer coaches, we support PLCs across the district in an effort to intentionally align and work with individuals to PLCs, to building goals, and then to also our district mission and vision as well. So this is seen as we look at SMART goal alignment from PLCs to building goals. Today was the first day of the PLC Institute, and it was amazing to see how many WISETA administrators, teachers, peer coaches were all there representing and learning and thinking of how we can, make our school even better. So that was just so evident. And then, so if I could have a volunteer read this one, please. Thank you.
It's the same thing.
Yes.
I would say this year has been the most effective use of my time with my peer coach. Our PLC did a group evaluation involving video recording, self-reflection, and discussion. Then we created an action plan to implement a strategy based on the data we collected. Then we came back as a PLC and shared our learning. It was a highly collaborative and reflective experience.
Thank you. And at Sunset Hill, we really focused a lot on this model because I had my regular position and then I served as a peer coach. And so to make things work well, we focused a lot on PLCs, and I thought it was amazing. Like, I thought it was a great year of learning and just teachers learning from each other. And so Jessica's going to share more about that.
So this is I just finished my 17th year in the district, and the QComp program began when I began. And so I've been a part of the journey as it's gone through its many changes and iterations of it. And this year, doing the lesson study structure that we implemented at Sunset Hill was one of the most impactful as far as not only improving my experience as a teacher, but also impacting our PLC and our grade level working together. So we started by always, twice during the year, we got to determine a lesson that we would, as a PLC, work together to decide upon what we wanted to do. And then we discussed what were the goals of the lessons, and instructional strategies we would focus on. And then we would each return to our own classrooms and use technology to record ourselves teaching that lesson. And then that we would share that recording with a teammate. And then without doing any discussion, watch the video of our teammates doing the lesson. And then we would come back together and share with our PLC and our peer coach what we noticed, what we wondered, what we saw from each other, focusing on the asset framing as well as what new learnings could we try as individuals. And so then we would discuss something that we wanted to try. We set a time period, went out and tried new strategies, and then came back together, reflected together as a PLC with our peer coach again. It was highly effective because it worked well for all of me and my 5 teammates because we're all at different levels of our career. And so we could see each other teaching and open our doors when we can't get out of our classrooms and watch each other do things that we're all doing, but we don't get to see each other do it. So the 2 things we did, the first one was focused on our reading and our small group set work within being a reader curriculum. And so we recorded us all teaching the same lesson to the same level of kids. And we were able to see what structures and routines we were all implementing effectively together. And we got to discuss why are those routines so important? And why is it so valuable for us all to be doing the same things? And then at the same time, seeing what little tweaks we would each make to make it personal to our own teaching and for our students. And then the second round, we focused on math and we recorded our number crunch lessons, which is something we do every day as a very integral part of our curriculum in Bridges. And it is a component that sometimes gets overlooked, but is so valuable because it is where new concepts are introduced to students and then daily practice throughout the year. And we were able to really, again, hone in on and dive deeper into those little practices that we do within a very powerful 15 minutes. And really dive deep as a PLC into what we do and why we do it beyond just what is our lesson plan. When I was looking back on my notes from both experiences, it really, being able to do the lesson study experience as a PLC really affirmed the impact of not only how powerful 15 minutes of instruction can be for our students, but also taking that time, whether 30 or 45 minutes as a PLC to share more about our little moments that we have throughout our day and how when we can create consistent growth together and connection together, it can bring on the most impactful growth for our students and ourselves. So as Michelle referenced, we were at the PLC Institute today. And the keynote speaker this morning, Dr. Eric Twiddell, referenced that there's many ways that a team can work together. And the PLC goal is to be collaborative. And doing the lesson study format during our peer coaching really helped us move beyond just being cooperative and coordinated with our lesson plans and really onto that collaborative effort to make student learning the most impactful it can be. So I'm thankful for your support for the peer coaching program, and it has been always a very positive experience as a WISET educator. So thank you very much.
That leads so nicely into thinking about culture of learning in our district and really referring to the systematic way of being rooted in that continuous improvement. So that might be social, emotional, behavioral, developmental, those academic outcomes that we desire for each and every learner. As peer coaches, we get to support this work. What a wonderful example, but support this work by providing those reflective coaching practices with school staff. And really the goal of that is about increasing our collective efficacy. Like how can we share and continue to push in this shared belief that through educator collective action, we can impact and influence student outcomes and increase achievement for all learners. We use that tagline for each and every. And so that's really exciting work. Okay, so here we are. We have our collective efficacy quotes that we pulled out from some educators across the district. Do I have a volunteer to? Thank you, Juanita.
Improve my teaching techniques with honest feedback. The goal is to improve students' understanding of the material, not see what we are doing wrong. The second quote is being able to observe other teachers teaching the same lesson and then collaborating and processing with them has been valuable for me and has had a positive effect on student learning.
Yeah, so many of us are sitting here probably familiar with John Hattie's research, even to a certain extent, point being that collective efficacy, that shared belief that we can impact student outcome and achievement can have a 4 times, sorry to get the numbers, but 4 times the impact on student like outcomes. And so it's incredibly powerful. And so in this collective effort that we have among peer coaches with school staff, we really are looking to further that shared belief in that partnership to influence those actions for learners and continue to influence them to also collectively believe that we can do this together. So it's been a wonderful year. I know we have one more slide that has a thank you on it. And we mean it. Really appreciate the support that you have provided us to continue to do this work across regular.
And I just add that I think in kind of a summary with all of this, that professional learning vision, as you saw and heard it unpacked here, has really been a powerful anchoring tool to connect all of us in this work, because connection is key. No one of us can do this alone to truly meet the needs of each and every student. And so how do we really leverage both the individual insights and strengths, but then what does that mean in terms of our collective action and innovation, while also being really rooted in what does the research tell us is going to help us improve things for all of our learners. And so it's been a really exciting collaborative year, and we're really looking forward to continuing to sustain this.
Any questions for us?
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for leading your training today. Right, and so it seems a little counterintuitive, you know, walk away to tell you about what you're learning, and so do want to acknowledge that, but it's also we're just so grateful in this collaboration. Thank you then for that gift of time to come to teach us so that we can continue to support the work that you're doing. I'm sure my board colleagues have some questions or comments. Linda.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for what you do. It's an amazing program. What about the numbers for next year and number of peer coaches, and how is the program going to be sustained or partially done, or just what?
Yeah, well, we're at 7 peer coaches for next year. And that was, we're at this last year. And so, as you heard Michelle, for example, we used some extra staffing that we had in teaching and learning to supplement the programs this year. So, for example, Michelle and Mike, and then Solveig and Becky also took some. So we'll have to see what our numbers look like this year. We're still staffed with that 7. I will always make the pitch, you know, I know what the next agenda item is too. But I think as we know what moves the lever, and again at the conference, so very clear is that coaching work and that building teacher collective efficacy. And we just heard over and over, it's not curriculum, it's not, you know, teachers, it's not students, it's systems in place to support teachers and students. And this model is excellent, as is, you know, along with our coaching or other coaching models. So we've made it work. Because we have such great committed staff, we've made it work through the PLC model. So we've made some shifts in the number of evaluations and how we record those, which has been positive. In the sense, I think we've heard across the system less about checking boxes and making it feel like I'm going through a process, and it need more about the experience and conversation. I appreciate bringing that in. So it's been good timing in the sense we've been really able to connect it to that PLC community and do a collective piece of that. So we're making it work. It's not ideal, if we're being honest, but we have it.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the asset framing piece of it. I think sometimes it's hard to see it just by yourself. And I'm always so impressed with the educators in our district. I just have to say that every time I see you are interested. And just how student focused this really is. It's really not about just the teacher learning, this is really student focused. So thank you for all of that.
I'll underscore what Linda said and what Dana said. I know it's been tough. I mean, that numbers were down and we asked you to do a pretty big job for a long period of time in a year that was challenging. And it's so exciting to hear what has been done and the learning that you have. And I love the nimbleness and the, and this is what we're doing, and maybe uncovering that don't have to check as many boxes and they have to have more conversations, right? And so thank you for our commitment to our students. Thank you for riding this journey with us. We really do appreciate all that you do, and can't wait to see what next year brings. So enjoy the rest of the conference. It's a few more days, is that right? Great. Enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we moved from what drives us, which is teaching and learning, to finance and operations, which is all that we do. And so we have a number of items under finance and operations in this reports this afternoon. The first is the technology levy planning, and we'll have some different modalities of presentation. So I'll turn it over to Dee Dee Caring to kick us off as soon as you get yourself.
Oh, no, we're good. I'll get ready, and as Amy cues this up, so good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Anderson. It's kind of an exciting time. It's been 10 years since we renewed almost 10 years. No, it has been 10 years since we renewed a tech levy back in 2014, and it's up for renewal again. Tech levies are very important for our school district. We have 2 of those. I'll go into further details when we do the finance portion. But we thought we'd kick it off with a little explanation from our Director of Technology, Wade Phillips. Luckily, Wade has had an opportunity to take his family on some vacation, so he video recorded his presentation. So Amy will play that now. We'll learn about what it is that they do from the technology standpoint, and then I'll talk a little bit about the finance side.
I'm Wade Phillips, Technology Director at Wayzata Public Schools. With the school board thoughtfully considering bringing one of our 2 technology levies to the voters in the fall, I thought this would be a great opportunity to share with you some important information about how technology is used here in our schools. Technology in Wayzata is mission focused on excellence for each and every student and strategic roadmap aligned. Our work is to ensure a world-class education that prepares each and every student to thrive today and excel tomorrow in an ever-changing global society. We're focused on preparing our students to meet the ever-evolving challenges and vast opportunities to be successful in a modern world. In the last year, we've had intentional laser focus on the following district priorities: improving the student experience by creating positive, meaningful, and healthy experiences for each and every one of our students. Ensuring student achievement will not be predictable by any demographic classification. And delivering on high-quality instructional practices, which is our main event. I'd love to share some ways technology meets the needs of all students and highlight the last year in the following key areas: our student focus, the main event around student learning and experiences; learning standards, ultimately what we want our students to be able to learn and grow; the learning solutions, focused on the allocation of our resources to meet our goals and needs; our service excellence, around stakeholder care, customer service, and operational excellence; and staff development, ensuring our staff stays up to date with the latest and greatest technology. Starting with the end in mind, with again Wayzata students at the center, we use the following ISTE standards in the development of our learning experiences. We know that today's students must be prepared to thrive in a constantly evolving technology landscape. Based on these ISTE standards, we want to empower student voice and ensure that learning is a student-driven process towards the intended outcome or academic standing. We want our students to be empowered learners who leverage technology to take an active role in choosing and demonstrating competency in their goals, such as using technology to seek feedback that informs and improves their practice. We want our students to be digital citizens that recognize the rights and responsibilities of living and learning in an interconnected digital world and model safe, legal, and ethical ways. We want our students to be knowledge constructors who know how to critically curate resources using digital tools to produce creative practices and student work. We want our students to be innovative designers who can understand how to use various technologies with the design process to identify and solve complex problems. We want our students to be computational thinkers that develop skills and use strategies for understanding and solving problems, like collecting data and using digital tools to analyze that data in various ways to again facilitate problem solving. We want our students to be creative communicators who can clearly express themselves using platforms, tools, styles, and formats with original work or responsibly remixing digital resources. And finally, we want our students to be global collaborators who are able to use tools to broaden their perspectives and enrich their learning by safely collaborating with others and working effectively in teams, locally and globally. From standards or outcomes to technology in action. At every level in our schools, we have sought to deploy creative, innovative, and purposeful technology solutions aligned to standards in a supportive curriculum and teaching and learning. At the elementary level, we have highlighted some fun, engaging, and creative uses. One example is the students in the lab coding and programming robots, again in support of the elementary tech curriculum and ISTE standards. In the middle, we have the students sharing in-class work via tools like Seesaw to their parents or guardians or other connected adults. On the right, we have students using an interactive smartboard for real-time, in-class, visual, and interactive learning. On the bottom highlights areas where we're using iPads or district labs to support self-paced and individual learning with various productivity tools or other creation tools. With collaboration and creativity in and out of the classroom, with digital citizenship and practicing of skills with access to many different technologies and opportunities. Our students are always practicing, always growing, always developing these necessary skills to be successful in a modern world, built on access and opportunity and solid teaching strategies. At the secondary level, again, in support of the student learning experience, where the stakes are a little higher, and the innovative use of technology is integrated into the daily learning work of our students. Access to technology and opportunity for the use and building of skills are essential to the student experience. Almost all curriculum, assessment, feedback, in-class or out-class work, and materials have some sort of digital component. Again, with a thoughtful and purposeful balance. There's a real synergy of analog, interpersonal connection, and the use of technology tools in this experience. The use of industry-relevant tools in career exploration is paramount towards college and career readiness. This is in support of our learning and our outcomes, again, relevant to life and industry. We see great examples of students using AutoCAD, Photoshop, and other common digital tools that will help prepare them for the work and life to follow. Now back to our mission, excellence for each and every student. We're committed to continual improvement of our systems, so it best supports teachers and builds upon the strengths of students and their families. We know that not all learners learn in the same way. At the same speed, we have varying prior skills, knowledge, and life experience. With technology solutions, we're able to meet the individual and specific needs of each and every student to reach their full academic potential. Some powerful examples are on display here and on any given day in their classrooms. Highlighted on the slide are just great examples of the use of technology for assistive communication, adaptive technology solutions, or support in the classroom for extension, interventions, or towards other assigned learning outcomes. From our earliest learner to our adult learners, and in support of our entire community, technology solutions are on display to solve problems, meet individual and collective needs, and ultimately to serve. Teaching and learning ecosystem is purposely designed around learning, teaching, and best educational practices. Each classroom is equipped with a voice amplification system, projectors, a smart board, or some interactive smart panel. We continue to update these systems in our replacement cycle as resources allow. As you know, iPads are also available here in Wayzata in support of the student learning. It has provided access and learning opportunities for all. We've had this program in place since 2012 and have integrated the setup, management, and use, and replacement cycle into the way of doing school here in Wayzata. We have great learning management and communication systems also available. Systems like Canvas or Seesaw or Skyward, and are used every day and integrated into the student experience in support of educators and our parents and guardians. We're using many design and productivity tools and creative tools used by students and staff, also in support of our learning mission. Finally, we have our curriculum and our curriculum review. All have an important digital connection. There's been a real shift by curriculum providers towards this model, and sometimes it's a model only. So as we're going through curriculum review, whether it be math or reading or science, as well as electives, they all have a digital component or a digital license as part of our replacement cycle. We do this in partnership with our teaching and learning department. Okay, shifting gears to technology services. Things like networking, our wired and wireless infrastructure, or high-speed fiber optic connectivity in partnership with Hennepin County and our local cities, or our internet access, both on-site or hotspots to meet the needs of families in the community. Other systems like our phone system, our email system, information systems that we mentioned before, like Skyward, Canvas, and Seesaw, or identity management, or local or cloud-based data centers. These are all essential items for operational excellence. Cybersecurity and privacy has always been a top priority here in Wayzata. We've had a formal information security program in place since 2018. That program has allowed us to create a 3-year cybersecurity roadmap where we have tasks, projects, and outcomes associated with the work. Every month, we work with our cybersecurity partners to ensure that we're staying up to date with the current industry and making sure that we're moving forward with our 3-year security roadmap, tasks, projects, and actions. We have a tried and true incident response plan and a 24/7 cybersecurity operational center contracted again through a third party to keep eyes on critical information security incidents when we can. This year, we rolled out a new cybersecurity awareness program for all our staff, knowing that the human side of cybersecurity risk is one of the higher areas that we need to pay attention to. Finally, we have the Minnesota Data Privacy Act, where we continue to inventory manage our vendors and our vendor risk. We work to ensure that families know the digital tools that are used in their system, ensure that we protect the data and the privacy of the information that we hold. One of the outcomes of the cybersecurity work is our S2 score, which is built on the 3-year security plan that we have established. It's an objective evaluation of risk in the organization and the maturity of our cybersecurity program. It provides a quantifiable measurement leading to the score. You'll notice in the top left, the 748 satisfactory vendor. So this cybersecurity score is built on 4 different components. Administrative controls, which typically are based around policy and our policy implementation from a cybersecurity point of view. Physical controls, which has to do with areas of access to our system, whether it be our data centers or sensitive areas within the organization tied to cybersecurity or network or infrastructure. Internal controls, which are things like access management, identity management, patch management, or getting passwords into systems. And finally, external controls, which has to do with systems like firewalls or other publicly accessible systems. This S2 score is marked as satisfactory. And it really means that Wayzata Public Schools has spent time, money, and effort building mature information security program. All right, moving on to physical security. So physical security has also been a real key focus area for many years here in Woodside. Technology is employed in support and collaboration with other teams to deliver on this part of our mission. Over the last couple of years, physical security has really collapsed on the technology infrastructure that I just went through. Areas like campus security cameras, or visitor screening when you come into our buildings, or systems like mass communication systems or paging systems are all part of this program. The top priority is technology supported. It helps us to assess and reduce our risk. And we work collaboratively with other members of our district and with community partners to deliver on this part of the mission. All the best technology and systems in the world will fail without good people and good support. Service excellence is powered by people serving people. I'd like to share a little bit about our team. Despite our heavy load and a relatively small team, we have a great, efficient, effective team supporting technology here in West End. As you see here, we have 9 site support people on our team. This gives us about a half-time person per building to have a one-on-one, in-person, face-to-face type support. We have 4 help desk members who you may have interacted with when you call our help desk at any given day, come into our office, or work through some of our trouble tickets. We have 5 operational staff and 3 information systems team members who come together to connect and make all the systems work on it. We have 3 teaching and learning integration team members who really work hard with teachers in schools and in classrooms to again deliver on the mission. Thinking about who we serve. Again, we have a relatively small team serving many in our community. We have over 12,000 students, both 50,000 parents and guardians connected to those students, and 2,500 staff members. Not to mention all the community members that we serve, from community ed, before school programs or after school programs, or prospective families coming into our organization. Service excellence, or again, excellence is our goal. This is a snapshot in time of one of the areas we're able to measure our performance. This is our fiscal year to date, where help desk items that were received were over 18,000, resolved 17,800, with an average response time of 8 hours, and a typical resolution rate of about a day. All along that, we have a 97% awesome satisfaction rate, which means the individuals that we get to interact with and serve rate us as awesome in that experience. Now, again, this is only a snapshot. While we have about 200, 250 tickets in the backlog at any given time, we have other things that we're working through, either one-to-one consultations, meeting people in the hallways, working with teachers in the classroom, doing informal consultations, or working through projects in the organization. Now, none of this would work without our amazing teaching staff and through the work of our technology integration and innovation. Our team works hard to ensure our teaching staff stay up to date with the latest advancements and develop creative instructional practices that provide students with relevant educational experiences, preparing them for the digital age. We provide many formal programs and opportunities for learning and growth of our educators. Again, items like one-to-one personal learning opportunities, or in the building in support of the personal learning team, the built teams, or the building as a whole, or more formal programs like conferences, seminars, or summer learning activities. Our goal is to foster a culture of innovation, encourage educators to explore new tools and strategies, and to leverage technology to enhance teaching and learning. Some key messages. First, I want to thank you and the community for the generous support over the years. And I want to emphasize that technology is critical for the learning experience. We rely on technology and the technology levy funding to provide a personalized education here in West End and updated access to educational resources that may become available. Continued funding will allow us to replace aging classroom technology equipment and student devices and maintain essential technology support for students, staff, and the community, and continue support is needed to help us achieve our mission. If you have any follow-up questions or need additional information, please let me know. Thank you for your time today.
Well, I don't know that mine will be as interesting as Wayne's is, but very good speaker and did a great job of overviewing what's going on in our district. But I'm going to go over the financial aspect of what an operator, a capital project or a tech levy is responsible for. But first, I just want to describe the three different types of referenda because sometimes that's confusing for individuals. So first is a school building bond, and that bond referenda asks voters to support a building of a new school. So the bond proceeds, the cash that comes from that bond, is then used for either land acquisition, new construction, building maintenance, and then general building projects. The tax is spread on NTC, stands for net tax capacity. And they're typically 20 to 30 years. Our school district has passed a number of bond referendums to build new schools, such as Meadow Ridge and Northwoods, and to add on to the high school, to name just a few of the most recent ones. Then the second one is the capital projects, or that's the official name, or tech levy, as we call it. That's the one that Wade just described. So it allows our district to generate some additional revenue for our technology and capital projects. And capital project referenda can be used for other things, but our school district is using those for tech levy purposes. So the revenue is provided through a local property tax, which is spread again on that NTC, and the max is 10 years. And then it has to be used for items consistent with the ballot language. That's basically what I was saying to begin with, that ours is for technology, could have it for something else. Both a bond and a referenda and a capital projects, there is language in the referenda itself or in the voter on the ballot that states what the purpose is for. And then the final one is the referendum revenue or operating levy, as we typically call it. And that's asking voters to support additional funds for day-to-day school operating costs. The combination of this is annual property tax levies in most districts, state aid. Ours is a little less on the state aid portion. So that one is very important as well. We're really grateful for our communities for having these three voter referendas either at some point in time or as this one is coming up for renewal. So as I mentioned, it's for certain capital projects and it's based on that net tax capacity. It can't exceed 10 years. And then the levy proceeds are placed in a special account. And the only purposes can be used for what we designated, and in this district it was technology. One thing unique with the capital project referenda is that you can have those held 5 years prior to the initial tax year. It also can be held on times other than the general election. You can hold it at different times as well. There's some parameters on that. So to the next slide. So we have, as Wade mentioned, we have two tech levies. One was passed in 2014 and the other in 2017. So the 2014 levy was passed for 10 years. There was a 1 year delay, meaning the vote took place and it was 1 year after that before we received the funds. It was originally for taxes payable 2016 to 2024. And then it has to be renewed by November of 25 in order for us to not lose revenue. And this one, which is the one we're talking about, is 4.32 million currently. And then the second one in 2017, 10 years, that one had a 3-year delay for taxes payable 2020 through 2029. The district must renew this one by 2029 in order to not lose the funds. And it provides $4.87 million. So why are we bringing this to your attention now? Well, we're hoping to ask voters to renew this on 2014 tech levy on November 7th of 2023. As you know, we also have a board election at that time. So we thought since we have to run an election that we would couple the two together. It, as we said, is 4.4 million per year. It does increase as the net tax capacity increases. Likewise, if the net tax capacity should go down for any reason, it would decrease as well. So it's a percent of that. Basically, no tax impact on, no tax increase on taxpayers. It would remain the same as if it was in place. And then finally, Wade alluded to all of this and what he's talking about, but in our 23-24 budget upcoming, this is the rough breakdown of where those categories that he talked about, that's approximately how much all of those categories cost. So you can see between the two levies, the $9.1 million is necessary to fund all of the activities that Wade described and in the particular categories that you see there. And with that, that is all my comments on the finance side. As a reminder, we talked about this levy earlier this spring as well, but wanted to bring this forward for your review. We will be asking the board at some point in time, I believe in July, to approve a resolution to move forward with the referendum for this fall on the November. Any questions on the finance side, the technology side? I'm gonna have to get a hold of Wade.
Right, well, Dee, I think, and if board members have a question around the technology side too, you can certainly voice it this evening and we can make sure that we write it down and get that, or he can watch the video too and we can get that to him. So thank you for that. Millen, is that a hand?
I think I have a question more for clarity. So the delay in those two levies, can you tell us why that happened?
Well, I wasn't here at the time, but I think it was the timing of when maybe there was another election. So like especially with the capital project referendum or tech levy, you might tie it to when you're doing a bond referendum so that you go out at one time versus doing multiple ones. So Chase may remember more of why we did it when we did it, but it was due to timing. And we probably had one that was expiring, so we coupled it with another referenda to make sure that the funds were there in advance. The nice part about being able to do this in advance would be if for some reason it doesn't pass, you have some time to do it again. This is critical funding for our schools to operate our technology department. So again, we're doing this a little early, which is okay. We'll know then that the funds won't be generated for almost 2 years. Yeah, good question.
I would just reinforce that response. I think that we do try to couple these with other elections that are occurring. Probably wouldn't go to the voters just with one of our two technology levies unless we really needed to for some reason. But and they're also staggered, kind of half and half with, you know, the other one doesn't expire then for 4 or 5 or 6 years after this next one. So that was by design as well, so that they come up at different maturity dates and we bring them forward. So I appreciate the question. Response, thanks, Steve.
Other questions? So just to confirm, this is the, and I know our stakeholders group has been talking about this too, but this process as the board has been brought up to date in the various related committees, whether that's finance, facilities, stakeholders. We came to this work session to get a general bit of information about the role of the levy and what we're doing. The next step would be that the board will need to approve a resolution to authorize the district to do what they need to do to create a question for the voters. So it sounds like that will come up then in July, maybe when the board would come. And so we'll vote on that resolution. Once we vote on that resolution, then that triggers that there then will, that we know that it will then be on the ballot in November alongside our school board election. Anything that I'm missing about details of process? Okay, all right. Well, thank you for that.
Okay.
See our next guest for our next agenda item, which is some conversation around attendance area proposed changes for both 23, 24, and 24, 25. our dear friend, Kristen Tollison. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on this summer afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, school board members, Dr. Anderson, nice to see everyone again. We are looking at modifying some attendance area boundaries. I was reflecting last night that almost every building we've had has either been over capacity or under, every single one. Virtue, which right now is our smallest elementary school. At one point was so large, we had moved the kindergarten to Central Middle School. Also with Plymouth Creek. And so it's just interesting how the age of neighborhoods and the growth patterns are not consistent and ebb and flow over time. So we are ebbing and flowing. So if you want, we do have an uneven growth pattern. Several of our cities are very limited in available space. As you can imagine, Wayzata, Plymouth, Medicine Lake, Minnetonka, and Orono are pretty much built out. There still is a large farm across the street from Meadow Ridge Elementary School, the Lemke Farm. That will be a game changer the day that opens. And I also, the two cities still have additional space for growth and significant space. Both Medina and Corcoran. Medina extends all the way past Polaris, west on 55 is a significant amount of space still to go. But the growth pattern is a little bit different in Medina than it is in other areas. And Corcoran is the other area. When we, Dr. Anderson will remember, when we did boundaries for both Meadow Ridge and North Woods, we referred to Corcoran as the sleeping giant. And it would be a game changer when it started to come on board, and it is coming on board. And some of those developments are 500 and 600 single family homes. I believe that the Ravinia is now on phase 12 or 13. And so these are significantly large areas. Almost all of the students in Medina attend Greenwood Elementary School, and all of the Corcoran students attend North Woods Elementary School. And as we built both Meadow Ridge and North Woods, we needed to move enough of a population, existing population, to create a cohort to start a school. And so there's a balance in trying to figure out what that magic number is do you move 300 kids and then grow, or do you move 100 and grow? And so in both cases, I think it was Bon Air that we took a big chunk of Bon Air and other ones to kind of seed the next school to create a cohort, or otherwise you just have constant growth. Ready for the next one. So looking at the building capacity of Greenwood and Northwoods, both buildings have a current capacity of 907, and that is with the increased class size. Wold Architects have not tested that 907 number, so it's a kind of a theoretical number, because with additional students in each of the classrooms, there may be not enough room in media center or in the cafeteria, so it's a theoretical number. Previously, the buildings had a capacity of 837. You can see from 1 year in May 1st of 2022, the growth at Greenwood to the year later at 2023. And then the same for Northwood. So both of those schools are experiencing rapid growth. Greenwood's growth in Medina was exacerbated by a new apartment building that was in Plymouth. That caused another blip on top of the Medina growth, which is primarily. We've discussed at facility subcommittee, some different options. We have had a history of redirecting new growth. It is somewhat more palatable because it does not cause a transition for our existing students. And so we are looking at redirecting all the new homes in Corcoran to Oakwood Elementary School. These would be specifically 3 developments: Vera, Ravinia, and Walcott Glen, and any new developments. What that allows us is to be efficient with our transportation. So if any of you are familiar with Medina, Foxbury Farms is a more mature neighborhood. If a family were to move into Foxbury Farms, we can't efficiently send a bus in for one family. So the turnover at Foxbury Farms would remain Greenwood, but we will be able to have a critical mass in those 3 developments to allow for transportation. When I visited with Rich Anga, who does our routing and transportation, he said typically once they add a bus, about a week later, the bus is full again. So we will fill over time a bus to Oakwood Elementary School. And whether the bus goes to Oakwood or Greenwood, or Oakwood or Northwood, it is further, but it is not as inefficient as it might seem. And then we would redirect the new homes of Medina to Gleason Lake Elementary School. These developments are currently Meadowview, Woods of Medina, Marsh Point, and Weston Woods, and any new developments that would come hereafter. I provided a map. This is a map of the Medina developments. They may not be quite exact, but these kind of give you an idea of where the developments are. The district still continues to go further to the west. And then this is Corcoran, and these are the three developments. Virginia is quite large, so it's not really reflecting the wraparound because it's a large area. Walcott Glen is brand new. I remember visiting with Dee Dee and saying, I think we're a year out, and then I called her back 3 months later and said the first house. So that's coming quickly. The process that we would use or recommending is that the families completing enrollment after July 1st, 2023 would be redirected. And sometimes we've used purchase agreements. I hesitate to say that I don't have a lot of confidence in how those would be dated. And so I think that we would choose to use an enrollment date rather than a purchase agreement date. We will develop, depending on the vote tonight, we will immediately work with developers of those 7 developments and notify them. We will add language to our website and to our address lookup, which is Guide K-12, which is our geoinformational system. And any other reference location. Amy and I were just starting to collaborate on something for the website. And again, as I said, mature neighborhoods would not be affected. It would allow for efficient transportation. I think one of the difficulties will be is that we will have neighbors that live next door to each other, and based on their enrollment date will not attend the same school. So I'm sure that as school board members, you will hear that come across your desks. Another topic for edification is that there's continued growth, as you know, that Central Middle School is significantly larger than East or West. Putting on your radar future consideration of feeder schools. Both East and West are below capacity and probably don't run as efficiently as they might in the block scheduling system. And so an additional elementary could be directed to East and another elementary directed to West. This would alleviate the continued growth at Central and bring out the population at both East and West. We would be looking at the elementary implementation to be effective almost immediately on July 1st. And then I think we'll come back to this group and talk about the middle school redirection, but we would be using this as a planning year for implementation in the fall of 24. Any questions, any comments by Dr. Anderson or Dee Dee?
I might just say that we've flown this mission before, as Kristen said many years ago, when first, I think it was Plymouth Creek and Kimberly Lane. I mean, very large, and we moved forward building Meadow Ridge. Then Meadow Ridge became large, and we were waiting to build Northwoods. And while that was occurring, and while we were waiting for that school, we've done this before, where we had Corcoran kids going to Oakwood and Medina kids going to Gleason Lake. So we've done this. We know it works. It doesn't necessarily mean on the front end it will be extremely popular, but once families got settled in, it worked really well. And I remember actually when we were then able to relocate those families to Northwoods when it was closer, there was some sadness and hesitation because they didn't want to leave Oakwood and Gleason Lake, because we all know the best elementary school in the district is the one your kid goes to. And that's the way we want it, really. It's a real positive thing that parents and kids develop that tight connection to their school. However, it's softened a bit when parents realize and recognize that they'll be attending a school, you know, that's more consistent with what we might call a neighborhood school. So generally that transition and that move is a relatively welcome one, even though there is some sadness. And even though the distance from Corcoran to Oakwood might seem like a long trip, in many ways it is only in comparison to what could be a shorter trip. And that's the school that is closer to the schools that I drive by. But for many of us, the school bus ride in the morning takes on a whole different meaning, extended beyond what even a trip from Corcoran Oakwood might seem like. And I think it's important to keep perspective on the fact that, we have a large school system. We have a lot of competing demands, not only for fiscal resources, as we'll continue to learn more about, but also space resources and programming needs within our schools. So as we strive to hit a better sweet spot of operational excellence, which is that mark of efficiency and effectiveness, concepts that Kristen has shared tonight, I think make good sense. I'm supportive and recommend later when the vote comes up that we support this move to the two elementaries. And sometimes when we've made boundary changes, one of the inputs that we oftentimes get from families that might be relocated from their school to another one is, why don't we move families and neighborhoods that haven't been established yet and are not settled into a school? And this is consistent with something that we hear regularly when we're going through this boundary change process. So this will work just fine, but it does not mean that we won't hear maybe some concern about it, but we've done it before and it has worked really well. And the principals are understand that this change is possibly forthcoming in board action. So thank Kristen for her work. Working closely with the developers and the families that will be impacted, and we'll work on getting communications put together and benefit forward and implement this model.
I will also add that we did consider Birchview because it is also a central school feeder. But concerned about just that much additional travel time and having to go through and get into the neighborhood and navigate past Oakwood and in kind of the central school area. So there is a stretch down 101, and we have used Oakwood in this manner in the past.
Thank you, Kristen. Board colleagues, any questions or comments? Cheryl. Thank you. It's a lot of work to do. Is there a risk of, if we redirect some neighborhoods to Oakwood and then next year consider moving Oakwood from central to west? Is that going to upset that sort of?
It probably does limit the length of time that west. It will probably shorten the horizon a year. I do think that probably the year 24-25, it'll have to be a deeper dive and a look. I'm sure Sunset Ellen Birchview could use some reshuffling. So there may be a need by that at that point. Yes, you are exactly correct. That was a consideration we looked at. So by redirecting, if we redirect Oakwood to west, and we redirect Northwoods to Oakwood, that we are growing west faster than east. And so yes, that exactly is a consideration. And it will limit our horizon.
But all of that sort of depends on growth in the district in general and how central ends up being, what the pressures are for another middle school possibly in the future. All of that. Yes, you're correct.
I think just as a reminder too, it's important to point out that currently Central has about 1,500 students, grades 6 through 8. And East and West both have, I think, around 700, so a pretty accurate number, give or take, number of students.
Yep.
But, so less than half the size, and the capacity there is really underutilized at East and West, and it's really overutilized at Central in creating some crowding and other types of challenges at Central, given that there's a lot of traffic trying to get in to the school in the morning and get at dismissal time. So it's it goes beyond just having enough classrooms and the passing time of that many students. But you have to schedule lunches and accommodate within the lunchroom size that you have. Maybe if you spill over spaces if you can. So there's a lot of challenges with it. Given that a middle school of 1,500 in and of itself isn't terrible, but cheap facility to support it, and the facility is really kind of maximized right now, as is the traffic flow, despite a lot of improvements we've made with that. That's challenged as well. So I don't mean to paint a picture that 1,500 in a middle school is again in and of itself bad, But when you have two other middle schools that have capacity and there are opportunities to utilize that more efficiently. I think it helps us financially too in the long term. We can maximize operational excellence and be efficient and effective to the best degree possible. It makes a big difference financially and to the student experience.
There comes Sheila.
I had a question, just a clarification question. Because some of the neighborhoods have names, when you're talking about, which students are going to be, staying at Northwoods and Meadow Ridge, it's houses that are already built, even though they might be part of a neighborhood that's not finished building. It's only the new houses in those neighborhoods that will be going to Oakwood and recently.
Yes, new families.
New family.
Yes.
Well, new families in new construction, new families going to old construction
Would, yes,
would remain at North Ridgewoods and Meadow Ridge.
Northwoods and Greenwood. And yeah, so we're really focused on the ones that, and I'm building new addresses every single day. And so it's those that we will be redirecting, not the turnover of the 1980 house in Foxbury Farms.
But are some of those neighborhoods that have the same name and some houses are built already and some have not,
Yes.
and so there could be families in that same. Neighborhood with the same name that are going to different schools.
Absolutely.
That will be basis, right?
Yes, but there will be houses next door to each other. Just by sheer, I bought on a cul-de-sac because I wanted that spot and you bought 6 months later across the street. That the children will go to two different schools, and that will be the concern of the families.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice to actually, like you said, have the develop only where you want them to.
Yes, yes. Ask permission in advance, yes.
That'd be so nice. I also know that you have crystal balls, so.
Yes, I do, and a magic 8 ball.
Okay, so these two developments, Corcoran and Medina, they have these new neighborhoods coming up, and you have said that any new development also will go to Oakwood and Glisten Lake. My question is related, or all these questions are related. What is the current capacity of this? What is the full capacity, and what is the time frame where you see that you see this situation again?
Yep, thank you for the question. So we should. Because I brought all that data. So, 1 second. Wasn't one of them, it's the one of the original ones that we did, but there are plenty of seats at both Oakwood, and especially now that the second floor of Oakwood, the staff are moving out and we have to just think through about how we will utilize Oakwood. There'll be plenty of capacity at Oakwood, and also Gleason Lake had enough space to get us through the 26-27 school year. Yes, that is my anticipation, unless it's completely wonky. I will say that I think that we will be looking at less probably for the 25-26 year. Yes. That's just, again, with the crystal ball. Yeah.
I might just add to that with West, maybe a clarifier might be. That may be on the front end of where we'll start experiencing some of the crowding challenges that Central might be feeling now. Is that safe to say?
Yes, absolutely.
So it doesn't mean by then we necessarily have to have the solution ready to implement in the, was it 26-27?
20, yeah, yes.
School year.
26-27.
But we might be feeling it a bit, and we can probably find a way to kind of retrofit for a couple of years beyond that, but it may not be with some tightness and convenience at that point, but it's probably still among the best of the imperfect options that we can consider, short of a fourth middle school, which, we need to ensure that we've reestablished our growth trend and patterns in the district like we had for 10 or 15 years in prior years. We're still kind of pushing the reset on establishing what does that look like in current. It's come back, but it's not still the normal robustness that it was before. If we hit that again, it becomes predictable, and there are things that are going to blow us off course with that. Of course, you can never really tell, but we need to see some trend lines before I think we can commit the board and community to the fourth middle school. So I don't think we're ready for that yet. We still have some capacity.
But this will create some space.
Yeah.
To make that decision.
Listen, I have two questions for you from a family experience. So just to repeat, I think you've said this before, but I'm living in Ravinia right now. Does that mean my kids have to go? That doesn't mean that my kids have to go. It's the new, if I'm a new, they're creating a new
Yes, we will
address,
talk
right?
no transitions for families, existing families.
All right, it just, that seems important to just keep saying. And then second, my question is, when we did our last big set of boundary changes and we remade our map, we grayed some check marks out and we were non-committal in our color and dotting indicator. So if I was a new family moving into Wayzata, I might have that idea that I wouldn't make an assumption of what I was going to go to. Can you tell us, and I should have done my homework before this meeting and looking at this, but can you tell us, are any of these in that grade area? So families, if they had been shopping for that, like if I was living in Marsh Point or something, if I was shopping, did I think my Marsh Point house was going to be a place, or was I in a gray area? Do you know?
You are correct. After the last round of boundary changes, we produced some maps that were all of Medina was hashtag and kind of said that this is Greenwood. And we will determine it at the time. And due to that, on our website, all of our lookups say that the school of enrollment will be determined at the time, the school of attendance will be determined at enrollment. Because it's very hard in some of them when a brand new address is put in and it runs off of Google Maps. If Google Maps doesn't know because it's brand new, it sometimes has to guess where the house is. And so we do put several disclaimers, but I will share that Walcott Glen does have a big sign that says attend Northwoods Elementary School. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, but nobody lives there yet.
sure.
So,
And no one reached
They'll have
out to
a game sign.
verify that.
what?
No one reached out to verify that, correct? In the
Correct,
district
yes,
before
correct.
they put the sign up.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for this. We know that you keep the pulse on this very well, and we really appreciate all of your work. So thank you. So again, from I'm doing process verifications, right? And so board members, you will be asked at our special meeting that will happen immediately following this, to approve a recommendation to assign these 2 realignments of homes as discussed in this board work session. And so I guess I'll do one last call. While we have Kristen here, are there any questions or any pieces of information that you need to have? Anita?
One question, thank you so much. I think I understand this, but I wanted to ask a question just to make sure. So the new family, the new addresses that will have them go to the elementary school, the same family will go to the middle school. It won't be where we may go to different elementary school, but we'll all go to the same middle school, or that has that.
Northwoods or Greenwood and Gleason both moved to navigate to west. So that's not. Then we will have to look at that we're looking at redirecting Oakwood to west. And so we will have a consideration at that point, because there will be a mixed middle school then incorporated.
We don't think.
Correct.
Is that based on number?
That would be based on the next phase of this, short of a big huge apple cart upset and moving existing families. This will create space until and that's why we considered Birchview, because it would have been a central to central transition. But the concern was that additional distance would just complicate the travel time in the morning and the afternoon greatly.
I might just add on that too, since Kristen has reinforced the possibility exists in Oakwood would go west. The other school that we've looked at that intuitively makes sense to go to east would potentially be Kimberly Lane. So again, those decisions haven't been made yet, but when we look at transportation lines and kind of the co-location of our elementaries, it's possible that would make sense to have students in Kimberly Lane go to east and help fill out east, and Oakwood to west and help fill out west as well. So I think it's just important to mention that in this context as well. But again, the middle school change has not been determined at this point, and we won't be having work action on that thing. But I think there may have been some of your board materials that might have alluded to that change as well. For consideration, maybe you mentioned it, but I just wanted to reinforce it and.
Perfect, consideration.
One last question. At this time, do they share with you the demographic of families to
We get a sense of the families that move into Corcoran are very young, typically. We are seeing more of the Medina being in some cases, our existing families, in addition to movement, but our families move from southeast to northwest. They don't move the other direction. So families that are part of Birchview or Sunset Hill move north and west, but the reverse does not typically occur.
Any other questions? Again, middle school conversations are being considered, explored, discussed in committees, not on our agenda this evening, but seem relevant to bring up and let our community know that we are indeed talking about middle schools as well, because we recognize the space inequities of a central middle school and an east and west. On our board packet agenda for this afternoon, for our special meeting is the elementary schools. And in this work session, we're having some conversations and some questions. So I'll ask again, any additional questions or reflections or information that you need to know?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, and then we have one more presentation for this afternoon in this work session, which is a budget conversation. And then this will be our last agenda item before we move to our special meeting. So I see that Scott is joining Dee Dee, and we will move it now to the agenda item, which is 2023-2024 budget presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Anderson. As you'll recall, 2 weeks ago, we provided a pretty long board budget presentation. I'm going to go over some of that again with a couple of extra slides added in for your reference. So Mimi's going to take the slides for us, and I will first go over that first slide in a minute here on the school district funds. We're going to focus on the general fund tonight, since that's the largest portion of our budget. We're going to focus on that. I think I didn't get any questions from board members really related to food service, community service, construction, a little bit on construction, but I think they're an easy question, and then debt service. So in the end, we'll look at all the funds as well. So you'll have an opportunity for that. And then when you get into approving the budget, all the funds are described in that as well. But then we'll also talk a little bit about that revised cost containment. So again, just a reminder that we have 5 different funds that we're going to focus on in our school district for our budgeting purposes. So again, the general fund is the largest fund. It's about $205 million. It is all the school district operations. It relates to all of our teaching and learning aspects, our schools. It includes all of our salaries and benefits for teachers, for administrators, pairs, and professionals, all of our support staff. It includes our supplies and transportation, utilities, equipment, to name a few. It also includes the LTFM, which is long-term facility maintenance. That is a funding stream we receive, but it's for projects under $2 million. Most of our projects are under $2 million. And then the second one is food service, also called our Wayzata cafes. And for them, it also includes the salary and benefits. One of their largest costs is food, no surprise there, supplies and equipment. And then the revenue is typically primarily from meal sales. And usually that's from parents. But you'll see this year it's a little different because meals will be free for breakfast and lunch, and that would be more state aid versus parent participation and payment. That budget is just under $9 million. Fund 4 is our community service. You can see the different categories there: early childhood, family education, adult basic education, our Wayzata Kids or our child care program, youth classes, and then general community education classes. Their revenue is primarily from fees from patrons. That's about $13.25 million budget. Next is our construction. And so this is for major building projects. As I kind of mentioned earlier in the presentation on referenda, when you sell bonds, the voters approve, you put the revenue from that into the construction account and then you make those payments. So it's set aside for that specific purpose. And then again, that LTFM or long-term facility maintenance projects that are over $2 million at any one particular site or one particular project is that then it goes into a construction. It's considered a larger project. And then finally, Fund 7, that is our debt service, and that's where we account for the principal and interest payments that we make on our bonds that we received from the voter approved. We receive some state aid, but mostly local tax levy for those amounts each year, and then make those payments as well. So I mentioned that we had a longer presentation. Then next, looking at our general fund enrollment. So fiscal years 23 on out are estimates. So our previous years, fiscal year 19 through 22, those are actual figures. And if you'll recall, we talked about the fact that the dip in our enrollment from fiscal year 20 to 21 decreased. So not only were we planning on an increase due to our typical new housing like Kristen just talked about, we expected more students coming in through that, but we did not receive it. It's about 250, but we actually lost 200 students. So that difference of about 450 compared to what we budgeted was kind of a devastating year for us, if you will, based on our plans. So decrease down and then decrease down again in fiscal year 22. Seeing some uptick, we've had students, as we discussed earlier, that made different choices during the COVID years. But now we're starting to see that enrollment kind of bounce back, and you can see the growth going forward. We used Hazel Reinhardt, a well-known demographer in the state, and she provided a demography enrollment study back in December of 22. So her figures are based on birth rates, our current census, housing developments, and then migration of students in and out. And just a reminder, kindergarten has been where we've been a little low. I know when years ago, probably back in 19 and 20, you were looking at around the time of period, you'd be around 1,000 students in kindergarten. We're closer to 870. So we still haven't caught up on that early years of students. So when we looked at Hazel's figures, she does about 4 different renditions of it, and the one we selected to go with is low kindergarten, high migration, meaning our kindergarten classes are going to start out smaller. We're going to see that migration with new houses being developed or people moving in. So those are the figures for enrollment. Next, when you develop a budget, you need to have financial forecasts and some assumptions. So these are basic ones. I've not included maybe everything, but the ones that most people are aware of and think about. So enrollment, again, LK stands for low kindergarten, HM stands for high migration, and those are the figures that you saw on the previous chart. The next on the revenue, originally when you saw this chart back in January or February timeframe, the funding formula we had 2% and 2%, and I believe we had 1% and 1% in those outgoing years. So we know that this upcoming year that we will have 4%. We did have 2%, so in effect, the 2% additional is new for what we were planning. And then the 2% next year is what we had previously, and then an additional 1% in those outgoing years. Federal are about 2% across the board. Other, that's like aid receipts and football, activity and athletic fees, etc. Around 3%, and then our tax levy, those are estimates based on what we think the trends are as it relates to various tax capacities and inflation rates on things. One thing I wanted to point out on the funding formula is to remember that the state legislature did pass a new funding formula tied to inflation. And so that starts with the 25-26 school year. and then goes on, goes forward. We do know that it has a floor, meaning the lowest amount is going to be 2%, and then the highest amount is going to be 3%. And we've chosen in our models to go with the 2% of floor. It's being more conservative in the model. I think they said that the 25-26 was around 2.17. We just left it at the 2% going forward. Adjust those in future years when we have more. Next, when you look at the expense side, and I'll have Amy go back to one. Thank you. Salaries and benefits are either per the contracts that we have in place or board parameters based on any upcoming negotiations. Medical, this is one that did change from what we previously showed back in the February timeframe, is that medical dental, we now know that that increase will be 7%, and that was based on making some adjustments to our plan to keep it lower amounts. So Stacy and her team worked with the budget or the committee, the benefits committee, and made some changes to get to that 7%, and then projecting 5% going forward. You see utilities at 6%, and then transportation upcoming year at 7% for transportation. But we know that this year it was closer to 13 to 21%, depending on special education was closer to 21%, and the regular was 13%. That's why we have a percent of 10% going forward, and then all other roughly 2%. So how we develop those financial forecasts and assumptions is based on either the best information that we have, we modify that when we know or have better information, and we look at historical trends as well. Been a little more challenging with these pandemic years to get true numbers as to what they are, because as you know, we've had varying expenses as it relates to shipping costs or those that have made things look more expensive. So continue to monitor this. This will likely change next year when we come to this. So with that, then we take all of that information and we move that forward into our preliminary general fund budget. Now this includes all aspects of the general fund. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but it includes all of our staff development, includes our long-term facility maintenance, our tech levy. It includes all of those expenses that occur in there. So it also includes, when you see state aids and grants, it includes all the legislative actions that took place this last year. So we had numerous spreadsheets from the state of Minnesota, from the Department of Ed, to give us information for Wayzata specific. So things like the 4%, which is for us an additional 2% on what we had first estimated. It included that special ed excess cost aid that we knew we would get once they passed that bill, roughly $4.4 million. There's some transportation dollars in there. I think it was 360-some-thousand. I don't have all of them memorized. There's some funding for media. There's some funding as it relates to EL. So a variety of different funding sources related to that. And all of those have been included in that figure. Federal aid, you'll see that that is decreased. We, in the last 2 years, did experience some additional federal aid, as it mostly the increases in the past have been due to the pandemic. And so those funds are sunsetting in the 23-24 school year. And so that figure has gone down. And then other local revenue are some of those items that I mentioned. It might be insurance rebate, reimbursements, those type of things that go into the other local revenue. Then on the expense side, the largest portion of our budget is salaries and benefits. And you can see the figures for those going across. Purchase services, those have increased, and part of that, particularly you'll see it go up in 22-23. That has to do with our LTFM and some of our transportation costs. Those both going up, as you know, when we increase the amount of our LTFM, and so a lot of that is purchase services through that process. Supplies and materials gone down just a little bit over the past year, and that's just partially timing and some things that we held back on increasing the inflation rate that we supply to our schools. And then capital, that's remained pretty much the same as it was last year. Again, that also takes into consideration some of the increase in that LTFM. And then miscellaneous other, that stays pretty much the same from year to year. So the overall budget increased about $2 million from the previous school year. And then you can see the change in the fund balance going from year to year. So last year, 22-23, roughly $6.5 million use of fund balance, which does cause our fund balance to go downwards. Next, if we go to the next slide, just quickly to talk about the revenue, just comparing the 2 years. Yes, we did receive some additional funding from the state, but you'll see from year to year, it's only about a 1% increase. So 59% of our revenue in 2023 came from the state, and in 24 it came at the amount of 60%. Likewise, our property tax then went down as a percent compared to the previous year. Federal remains pretty much the same at 3% of our overall budget, and same with other. Next, when you look at the expense side, roughly 70.9 or just under 71% of our expenses relate to salary and benefits. That's pretty common in most school districts as well. Purchase services, that includes things, as I probably mentioned earlier, transportation, tuition agreements, contracts, LTFM, and some of our technology as well. And then supply and others, just under 4%, and then our capital at roughly 9%. Next, when we look at how do we spend our funds, as you see in the upper left-hand corner, 77.22 cents of every dollar goes to support students. And then what that includes is the figures down below for our instruction and instructional support, as well as our pupil support. So instructional support is just what it sounds like. It's our teaching, it's our in the classroom experience, it's our special education services, tech ed, all of that are included. Pupil support, that's things like media specialists, it's our nursing, it's our transportation, all of those included in that. Then when you look at the upper right-hand corner, 10 or 16.5 cents on operations and fixed costs, that's taking care of all of our buildings, our utilities, our construction, all of those costs related to the taking care of our fixed assets. And then 2.7 cents of every dollar is on district and school administration. That includes the superintendent's office, includes school board, principals, includes portions of teaching and learning that's related to the direct oversight of those programs. And then 3.47 cents of every dollar is spent on district support. That includes the communications department, finance, HR, technology, some of our legal expenses is all included in that as well. So next, if we look at our general fund balances, and these are all fund balances combined, okay? So I know it's hard to see, but on the very bottom is a green bar, and that's the non-spendable fund balance. So it's something that can't be spent in, it's not in cash, it's an item such as inventory. So those are items that we must hold aside and account for them, but they're not something we can spend. Then the next bar is the white or light blue is restricted. And that's where there are constraints on the resources and the availability of those uses. So those are similar, some of those items are staff development, or operating capital, LTFM, our tech levy, our A&M funds used for the purpose that they were assigned from this. Some people call them categorical aids and spending. And then next, the gold bar is the assigned fund balance. And that reflects a school district's intent use for sources that are not in that restricted or committed. And they're established for a specific purpose to be used in the future. And you can see those amounts have varied over time, and some of those funds were used to help offset some of the losses that we saw during the COVID years. And then finally, on the top portion, blue portion of the bar is our unassigned fund balance. And it represents funds not classified elsewhere. And they're used to meet the any current and future years expenses And basically, a lot of people think of this as a savings account, which isn't all bad to think of it, but this is what you use when and if you have to, and you need to keep funds set aside. And if you had an opportunity to read through the longer budget report, you'll see that this is roughly 4 weeks of expenses. So it's not a long time to float a district this size. So it is a little less than most finance people are comfortable with. So anyhow, those are the various general fund balances. Next, if we turn to the next page, we're actually showing the percent of that blue bar, looking specifically at that and how that percent is arrived is by taking the unassigned fund balance and what percent of that is of the general fund expenses as it relates to unassigned type of expenses. And it's best indicator of the school district's financial health. And our school board policy has a policy of 5 to 7%. I know that you all know that. And you can see we've always been able to keep that above that. Our high point was in 1920, just prior to the pandemic, at 11.4%. Feel grateful that we had those funds because we did need to use those during that time. I'm sorry I didn't miss 22, 23, the current year, we're going to be just under 7% at 6.51. With our cost containment plan, we hope to get back up to that 7.99% in the 23-24 school year. But it has fluctuated over time, and reasons for that may be things like new growth, like Kristen talked about earlier, when those come in and our schools are more full, they're more efficient, and we're able to set some funds aside. But you can really see how the effect of the pandemic did affect us in those years after 1920. So next, I know we went over this at the last meeting, but I wanted to kind of go over it one more time. So again, looking at fiscal year 23 through fiscal year 27, and the enrollment and future estimates up there are the numbers from Hazel Reinhardt's demographics study. So low kindergarten, high migration. And then the percent increase on the funding formula is put there as a reference. It doesn't mean that the rest of the percents that I shared in that earlier assumption slide are not part of this. They are, as well as all of the funding that I talked about that's new through legislature are all included. Generally, when school districts look at what is their funding formula, it's the biggest portion, and therefore it's always drawn more attention to that. So with that, all of those things I've described on those previous pages then produce that total revenue going across, starting in 23 at 170 million up to 198 million in 2027. So you may be asking, why does this chart look different than the other one that I showed? Well, what we've taken out of here is LTFM, we've taken out the tech levy, we've taken out staff development, anything that is a categorical aid that is really in and out for other purposes. So we're getting to, these are the day-to-day ones that support how we arrive at an unassigned fund balance. So in this particular slide, we're showing about 5.6 million in cost containment in year 1. In year 2, 3.269 million, and then we don't have any future cost containment built into this program. So as you know, we worked on a 2-year plan for quite a while. We started that back in November and developed a 2-year plan, made some adjustments, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and have those included. The one thing you'll note in there is that new unemployment costs at 1.8 million. We will have some unemployment costs this year. We don't know exactly how much, but if everyone that would be eligible did get unemployment for the whole summer, and it's typically what that new law is for, it's about $1.8 million. So in this current year, we know that the government provides providing some reimbursement. So as we spend that, we have to go ask for that to be back. So we're making an assumption that there's enough funds to cover all the schools in the state of Minnesota, not just Wayzata. And therefore, we don't have an expense in there, we don't have a revenue because we're assuming it wipes it out. Future years, there's no guarantee, so we've included that expense going forward. So as you can see, taking our revenue less our expense in each year going forward, up until the 27th school year, we are going to be above that 7%. Now we get out to 27, that's a ways out. I do believe it'll probably be better than that. As I described to some board members, to me, this is the worst case scenario. Unless there's some other pandemic out there, or some other major financial thing that happens worldwide. I think these numbers will be good and hopefully even better in future years. So this is our current financial forecast, and what I wanted to show you is on the next slide, same concept, but now we've removed all of the cost containment. And by doing that, we will drop below that 5% going forward. And in fact, by 26, we will be negative, which is called statutory operating debt. And certainly we would not want to be there, and we would not do. One other factor, again, to remind you, is that unemployment really is a big factor in exacerbating that percent going downward as well. So the next slide is we looked at what if we lowered that amount to $4 million instead of 5.6 and then kept it for 3.2 in the future year. You can see that again, starting next year, it'll be below that 7%, then below 5%, and then at 2.29%. So my point in doing this is our recommendation to the school board is that we stay the course with the cost containment that I'm going to talk about in a minute, and move forward with a better balanced budget that can be more long-term than having to come back and cost containment again. So the next slide. Yeah, I forgot to put the cost containment ones before this. Can I go up to that one and then come back to this one? Maybe? Thank you. So these are the cost containment items for district administration. I'm showing you the detailed slide. I didn't print the summary one. So in the detailed slide, you can see each one of our district departments, finance and HR, communications, superintendent's office, teaching and learning, technology, all made reductions of some sort or reduced costs as it relates to administration. There's 2 items on there that changed, and that relates to HR had a little more savings in their category, and then also in our teaching and learning department increased theirs low bit as well. So the admin is actually a little higher, about $112,000 more than it was back in February when we shared this. No change to 24-25. Next, when you go on to the next slide, then when we look at elementary, middle, and high school, slight changes were made in their administrative support. Just a little decrease in each one of those categories that most of those went over to the next year. Some of that had to do with just the timing of this and how it wasn't going to work in the execution of that. So slight decreases there. And then when we move down to the next slide, then we'll see that transportation, we have a separate line for that. Previously, we did totally eliminate the 2-mile walk zone. Hearing from you, hearing from community members on how difficult that is to manage for parents. It has been removed. Now there are a couple things in there, but those have to do with some extra routes that we maybe can eliminate that are driving children to extracurricular type things in both years. So less in there. The fee, of course, for the 2-mile zone is gone because that we won't be doing. And then on the revenue side, We still have increase for athletic and activity fees and parking fees. We did that just in July 1, 22. So we wait 2 years and then look at increasing that again. And then adding open enrollment increase 9 and 10. That brings about $348,000. So it's taking the revenue less the additional FTEs that we would have, and that would give them that $348,000. So those are the totals, 5.6 million in year 1 and 3.152 in the following year. Then Amy, if we go back a few slides. So this is the total budget, including all of our funds. So the general fund. So you'll see the revenues at the top and the expenses at the bottom. And so the total revenue for all funds for fiscal year 23-24 is 244 million plus. And then the expenses are 245,341. So not to be concerned that there is a little more in the expense than revenue, but that mostly has to do with construction budget, because as I mentioned earlier, you only put money into construction and you sell bonds or have some proceeds for LTFM. So with that, I think that was the last slide, and I'm happy to take any questions. I have Scott here because he and David did a lot of the work, all the work. So understand a lot more, that might be able to answer some of the questions that you might have.
Well, Dee Dee, thank you. Scott and David, thank you for all of your work. Board colleagues, I know that each one of us have been asking lots of questions and digging in. And every time I think we see an administrator, somebody has something, which is exactly the work that we're supposed to do, is really as things come up. And so thank you all for the continued questions that you have, which have also influenced some of the details of this presentation. And I'm sure that there are some more questions or comments this afternoon. So does it make sense because Dave, why don't you come up now, because there's an open seat, and so then that way we have all hands on deck to answer the questions. So welcome to the table. Millen.
I have questions and then a comment and a question to you, a comment. So slide 6, where you had the revenue and the expenses, and the fund balance of 2.some million. What does that fund balance really mean? I know it includes everything, right? Everything that are assigned, everything is unassigned, so really.
Right.
What should we take from that?
Well, that's a tough one because it's a bit deceiving, as Steve kind of talked about, because included in those aggregated totals are your LTFs, your tech levy, capital, and a lot of those restricted funds, so they can drive some of those out. But really, those are dollars that have to be restricted and set aside. So
in terms of deciding on the board and all that, I really that my thinking really is not that important. Consider that versus the unassigned fund balance and the cost containment. Right.
Well, all of the funds, everything,
Yes.
especially what you saw in that last slide with all the funds, all of those are a huge portion of consideration. So everything must be considered and included in our budget.
Yes.
Yes.
Slide 19. Sorry, I looked at it. Number 19. So in fiscal year 24-25, if you look at the total expense contained in the second last line is 2.73 million. And then you added the revenues to get the total cost containment. How is that? How is
So
that revenue?
I can understand your question. So to meet what our bottom line is of what we either need to generate in revenue or cut in costs is that 3.152. So all of that helps our bottom line. Okay, so yes, there are some revenue enhancements or opportunities. So if you go to slide 19, so all of those are pluses to revenue on the top, and the bottoms are reducing expenses. So overall, if you think of 3.152 million of lower costs in general, will make our fund balance better. In the end, that's what this is making our fund balance better.
As if that revenue on the top did not exist.
Yeah, it's no revenue, so basically, otherwise we would have to increase the expenditure cuts.
Yeah.
At 3.15, that helps reduce.
Makes sense.
Thanks,
And then the third question, before I do that, I wanted to make a comment first and make sure that my understanding is correct. So. The budget, in my mind, is a two-edged sword, right? One is the balanced budget that the state requires, where your revenues and expenditures have to balance. The revenues have to be either more or equal to expenditure, it cannot be the other way. So that part is the balancing.
Can I stop you there? That's not necessarily the case. So certain categorical aids categorical categories can be lower and lower in revenue and an increase in expense. As well as the overall general fund, you can, and we have done this. We've spent more than we have revenue. But then that requires you to use fund balance. So you're using your fund balance to balance your budget.
So the state says that fund balance can be done, you can do cost containment to make sure that your expenses are lower. So that they balance with the revenues.
That's what
Or
we're
you can
doing here.
go over if you want, like we are going over because we want you at 7%. State does not require 7%, right?
The state does not, no.
You could have actually just cut costs in the 24 fiscal year. By, I don't have the specific slide in front of me, but hold on one second. So we could have cut the expenses by just under $3 billion to balance the budget, but the revenue and expenses balance out.
You could.
But the additional ones we are doing because we want the fund balance to be so much.
Correct.
And that's okay with the state.
Yeah, no, that's board driven. Policy
No,
was,
it's the cost, just cutting 3 billion.
no,
And
the
balance.
state does not require that. That's our decision here. Right, does that mean,
No, not
Not
really.
really?
No, it's not.
which slide are you on?
Let's look at side, well,
Slide 12?
let's look at the top.
Yeah.
Revenue is 182 point some million.
Yep.
Expenses 185.6 million.
Yep.
That's not a bad budget.
No.
You cut, let's say you cut 3 million, 3 point something in costs,
Yep,
then you would get. Revenue of 182 point something and expense of 182 point something. That would
That's
balance.
correct.
That is what the state requires, correct?
it does not require it. It does not require that our revenue and our expenses match. It does not, ever.
How is it a balanced budget?
Well, then you use fund balance. The only requirement for the state of Minnesota is that a school district is not in statutory operating debt. Which, Amy, go to like the next slide. When you get over there to the right side in 26 and 27, when your fund balance is negative, we are in statutory operating debt, and then the state of Minnesota comes in and does corrective action if you don't help. Right, yep,
So what he's kind of talking about is that we have that fund balance, which is kind of the savings, so it would allow us to have expenditures greater than we pull from that savings account, the other side, but as soon as that goes beyond to the slide up there, then you want statutory operating, then yes, the department gets involved.
look at fiscal year 23, year we're in. The change in fund balance is going down by 6 million. We are using fund balance. Now, there's another entry below the line that you can't readily see. It's closer to $3.5 million or so. So we can use that. The problem is we're now in that state of we can't continue to use that because you use that to get us to where we.
Well, 0% from that, 0 from that.
Yep.
But the revenue and expenses are matched, then the state is okay with that, right?
Sure.
That's what I
You
meant.
could spin down and go negative, Millen. You could,
Oh, even
I-
that is right.
you could. A board would never do that, but you could, it's just that you have to have a plan to get out of that. And it's really tough to get out of that and go that low. So, yeah. I don't know of many school districts that have ever done that. Unless something unfortunate happened that they weren't. aware of. I believe the district was in that position back in the 80s or 90s. So it's pretty rich for some people, and we would never want to do that. Right? We want to be a district of choice, and so you need to have fund balance to continue.
I'm not saying that we should do all this, I'm just trying to
You're
understand how the state requires us to do what to do that,
Yeah, they only get concerned when you go negative. Yeah,
but zero is okay.
zero's okay for the state.
Other question,
Yeah,
other question.
So if I can just kind of build on that a little bit, just the way I keep it in my mind is that our policy is to keep the fund balance between 5 and 7%, and that's a prudent thing to do. And I think that the rating agencies look at that heavily when they give us our AAA bond rating, which then saves us tons of money if we go out for a referendum and borrow money. So it's really important to keep that. I know it's really hard to say we have to cut these things in order to replenish our savings account. Because we did dip into it the last several years because of the COVID, the costs and not getting reimbursed so much from the feds and all of those things that many districts didn't have. So now, not only have we used that money out of our savings account, we then have to take money that we would spend on programs and stuff to replenish it right now. So I mean, right now, we're just feeling the real squeeze. But it's really important to get back up to that level so that we can maintain our ratings and to know that we have, if something, God forbid, happens, that we have at least 4 weeks of cash flow. So we can pay our employees and we can feel confident that, we're not going to go without a paycheck because we didn't have enough sitting there in our savings account. So I think that while thinking about these cuts or containing our costs is really painful. It's looking at the long term, it's the only thing we can do to be prudent and to keep confidence that we are going to be solid and stay excellent moving into the future. So
Yeah, thank you, Linda.
I think, and I just want to remind us, if it's still the case, that our policy is that the minimum fund balance is 5 to 7%. So it's not that we just need a 5% fund balance to be in really good shape. We need to be at that minimum. I'm wondering what in sort of ideal for a district our size would be in terms of the fund balance.
There's no specific guidance on it. Maybe Scott or David have other information, but I've always felt that 9 to 10% is a little more comfortable range. Now, not all districts have it. There's some districts that have a 20% fund balance. It just depends on sometimes the size of the school district. But I'm more comfortable in that 9 to 10 range than being at that 5 to 7, because you're constantly monitoring and struggling with that. If anything happens, I don't know.
Yeah, I would say, it depends on the size of the district as well, the number, so dollar amount and the percentage across the percentage would be more applicable. So where you go to a smaller district of 2,500, a 20% on balance is far fetched, but that's probably only $2 million. So it can vary significantly.
About that, would a district have a larger fund balance if they didn't have like OPEB? So that some of those costs may not be covered like we have covered with OPEB?
I don't know if that would affect anything, but it is nice to have OPEB that it does cover our costs.
But I think kind of what you're getting at is like a district that didn't have OPEB or tech or something. They would then be taking that out like their capital outlay, other funding streams that would then reduce from dollars we have to do other things. So that makes sense.
They'd be-
7, 9, 10% is.
They'd be doing a pay as you go levy, then you wouldn't get the money until an additional year plan where we can record our own instant as soon as we go. Which is nice.
I think I might add too, is we were heading into the pandemic years, we had, I think, about an 11% fund balance. Thankfully, if we had been at 5% at that time, what you'd be hearing tonight would be significantly different and much worse than the position that we're in. And I can also recall years where, because the state didn't have the money to disperse to school districts, they implemented what they call the shift. My term for that is interest-free loan that individual public school districts gave to the state. So in other words, they said, we don't have enough money in our checking account. We can't send you the money that you might need to make payroll. Because we had fund balances during that time, we were able to meet payroll. Some districts did not have a fund balance. They had to go borrow the money to make payroll until the state paid their bills and sent the money out in the form of disbursements to school districts. So the individual school districts not only had to borrow the money, they had to pay the interest that was not reimbursable. So there are some other types of advantages to ensuring that you have a solid fund balance to help bridge the gaps of unpredictable things. And we all hope we never again see anything like the pandemic with all of its impact. So many different ways, but we don't know. It could be something like that again, or something totally different that we can't predict. So, ensuring not only a balanced budget for an individual year or a couple years out, we also have to make sure that we take good care of the larger school district to ensure that 3 to 5 years down the road, and we have that sustainability and stability that's so important.
As long as we're staying on fund balance, can I ask a question with this? Ask at the end. So we saw from the budget that we drew from our fund balance last year, right? And what do, and one of the things that's helped our district stay financially strong is our AAA bond rating from Moody's. And so even if we're not, even if our fund balance is in zero, how would multiple years of drawing down from your fund balance to pay ongoing expenses and that fund balance decreasing, how would that reflect if we were to go out for a bond for a Moody's rating again?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we are a bit at risk. But we have going for us is we do have most of our other post-employment benefits and severance covered with our salaries and with our OPEB. That's huge, along with the fact that we have such great support from our community. So having an operating referenda, tech levy, I mean, it sounds like we have a lot of bonds, but we don't have a lot of bonds compared to other school districts. So we're very fortunate in looking at that realm. But if there's a continuation of cutting down funds or cutting budget and our fund balance dips much lower than it is, I would say that could be a factor. So that would be, all of it plays together with what we want to do. And I know I said this, but we really don't want to be I said at the school district that continues to cut budget. If we can have a solid financial plan to go forward, if we took out that 1.8 million, that number goes on, that above 7% goes on up to 27. So we're hopeful that we can do that if we stick to what we've got in our plan right now over the 2 years.
Other questions or comments? Benny.
Okay, good question. So as I looked at, and I know we talked about this, I asked you this question, as we looked at the proposed cuts, the proposed cost containment versus if we were to do a scaled back version. Yeah, the reason that we don't want to do the scaled back, I'm taking out that middle slide altogether. The slides where it's like we don't do anything that's that's no go. But if we were to do a scaled back version, it's going to still create a situation for us where we have to continue to be in cost containment for more than what we have already, we started cost containment last year. So it would be further out than next year. And that's something we do not want to do as a district.
That's right. So slide 3 and the scenarios I put up there showed $4 million and keeping next year at 3.2. Next year, 24, or so, the second year, 24-25, we will be below 7%. Then the next year, less than 5, and then 2.9. If you reduced it further than that, that just gives us grades. And just keep in mind, we did basically move from 6.6 million to 5.6. Bumped it out a year. And I don't remember who I talked to about that. By doing that, we've also kind of kicked the can down the road a little bit. So we've still got that $1 million worth of costs that we moved to next year. So the earlier you do the cuts, the longer term it is.
And the less the cuts would have.
Correct. Right, because you get rid of those expenses, you lose that inflation factor on it, and you cut that expense earlier than.
And I guess my question was really that same. I was actually going to take out slide 2 and just kind of ask that. And with the reduced cost containment, so when we are thinking about certain things that we're looking at, like arts, music, just different areas, is there an opportunity to look at that differently, or the way you have it set up on that slide 14? Is considering that not being a part of, how does that work?
So, slide 14, minutes that.
Yeah, slide 14. So, when I heard you say something like.
Slide 14, that would mean we would add something back. Right, whereas slide 12 has everything that you saw on the cost containment list is included in the budget plan. Yeah. So a couple things to keep in mind is we've also shared with most or all of you that if we have indication during the year that things are better, our student numbers go up, we're certainly going to look at maybe some proposals, but we still have year 2 to get through, right? We have to figure out those cost containments, but we do have some areas where we have some bigger class size, and we've met and talked. And Chase and Dana and I, Nate and Stacy have talked, and we'll work through that either using hotspots or some way to make sure that we don't have 5th grade at whatever that number Stacy is 32. So looking at that, we'll also see how many kids. We're still at that weird stage where kids aren't totally enrolled, or they haven't withdrawn. They might have issue in each school, you know, where school district and have made a decision, or the family hasn't. So we'll have a little bit better numbers coming up here, and you see enrollments, as you heard, she's starting up new addresses all the time. But we also have withdrawals. I mean, we just have to face it. People do move, go elsewhere because of choices. So all of that takes some time, and truly August is when we start having a better picture. Sometimes we have a better picture on day 1. Let's actually show up. So, yeah. Sheila.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Scott, and then.
Oh, no.
I'd like to hear you.
No, I was just gonna kind of build off of the fund balance, and that's something you pointed out in the last board meeting. It's just, we are a pupil-driven revenue system, so that is the assumptions going forward. So like with housing market, with the economy, all of those things could vary significantly. If we had a 2008, obviously that could hit the projections that Hazel did that we used. So that, I guess, kind of to Dee Dee's point, keeping that above that 7%, probably closer to 9 or 10. You know, we do make assumptions on this, and the crazy thing about school finance, which I'm reminded by my friends at Corporate America a lot, is they say, you have no control over your revenues, you just have to estimate, use best available information, and it's yes. And I said, well, what happens if you're lower? Well, we can't really sell anything, you know, and even if we sold land or we sold a building, that has to go back to not Fund 1, it has to go back to that. So, and I think Dee Dee said in the last presentation, you know, if COVID wouldn't have happened, we would have been almost north of 13,000 kids right now, which that's a whole different ballgame, revenue wise. Sorry.
Sheila. Yeah, a couple questions. I guess the first one, we did get money from the state that we weren't expecting.
Yeah.
And remind me, the cost containment that we're seeing on slide 12, you said you pushed like $1 million of that to fiscal year 2025. But overall, we're still cutting the same amount, there's not a big decrease from the original.
Total over the 2 years.
Total over
That's
the 2 years, okay.
Yeah.
Could you describe a little bit, I know I've asked this already and I'm just gonna hear it again. With that extra money coming in, you know, you would think, well, maybe it would free up money for the general fund. I know some of it was for special education and EL. So why is it we're not seeing a decrease in the cost containment?
Yeah, so I'm gonna bring you back to 2021 school year as a refresher from, I guess several times you've heard this from me, but. So not only did we not get 250, we thought new students would be coming in, we also lost 200 kids. So that 450 students, say, is roughly $5.5 million in new revenue. We didn't get that. But we budgeted and had staff for 450 kids. So our expenses were higher. So when you have high expense and your revenue and that difference that Millen was talking about, it was $9 million. And it was too late to lay off staff. We'd already hired by the time those plans came in during the COVID time. So we suffered through a loss basically of $9 million or using some other fund balances to cover some of that. Well, if you don't make major changes right away, that cost goes on, and that's part of what has happened here. So we have been spending fund balance, and we spent fund balance this year, even though we made cuts. I don't know if you remember that, we made about 3 million cuts this year, and we're spending down fund balance. So you can't continue to spend down fund balance without making a correction somewhere. And that's what this year is, it's making that correction. Are we grateful for that new money? Yes, it's provided the opportunity for us to improve our fund balance a little bit this upcoming year and future years as well.
So we would have been in a much worse place.
Correct.
With the same cuts, we would have been much worse.
Yes.
Well, so we budgeted in our forecast, we factored 2%. So we only got an additional 2% when you look out to FY 25, and they potentially chew that all up with the 1.8 million we're estimating.
That brings me to my next question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So knowing that there are no guarantees,
Great.
but also knowing that, you know, they provided funding for unemployment this year and that the plan is to provide it in future years. If they do, will that change? How will that change things?
Oh, sure. I mean, if they would have left this as being a levy, which it used to be,
Yeah.
we wouldn't be talking about that 1.8 million, and we would have 1.8 million every year in funds available. So it does change it.
Would we potentially, you know, for fiscal year 2025, if we get funding from the state for unemployment and that line item is taken care of? I mean, can we revisit some of the plans for 2025 or?
Well, we every year we'll come up with a new projection. So to answer your question, yes, but I want to make sure that we have something going forward that's sustainable. Some of the things we have in year 2 that are being considered are long-term things that if they're reduced a little bit can really help. And that's the position I think the school district should consider and wants to consider, is making sure we're fiscally sound for what we really want.
I think I heard you say earlier, without the unemployment costs, would probably by 2027, we wouldn't be in the red.
Right, we would not. Without even crunching the numbers, I would tell you. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Thank you. You're good.
A couple. So just to repeat that statement, right? I think you're to restate your question and to restate your answer. We will, no matter what, have a conversation about the proposed revenue cuts and revenues for next year. Like, we are looking at this plan, the administration is making some recommendations about what we need to do. But this process of a budget, of the process of building the budget happens on an annual basis, and we have this conversation. We've had some seeds planted and are doing some due diligence, but that happens. Am I right to say that?
That's right.
Okay, all right. Another quick comment, and correct me if I'm thinking this way, some of that big fund balance that we had in that school year when it was 10.2 after the 2019, wasn't that also, Superintendent Anderson and board colleagues that were here, correct me, that came out of an operating referendum where we went to the cap, and even though we were facing rapid enrollment growth, we still had this large amount, but that we were banking because we knew that our funds don't keep pace with inflation. And so even in good times with enrollment growth and everything going well, we knew we needed to be banking for a problematic time. The problem is that the times that we're going to be troublesome were a lot more troublesome than we anticipated. Is that correct? Am I understanding?
Yeah, I don't remember the timing. I think it was 2017, right, when you passed the last operating referendum with going to the cap. So you do get some of those funds ahead of time before maybe the spending occurs. But there was some other events that happened in 2019-20, the increased student count by 215 ADM. There was some additional special education revenue that hadn't been forecasted into the plan. And also the student activity accounting came into the general fund, so that made a change too. That was a big change. And they also put some, as they put some brakes on spending, and as things started to shut down in 2020, when the pandemic came, we almost started to stop our spending and as best we could planning for what the future would bring.
Two last questions, one for you, and then I want to turn one over to you. So one other question, is it fair to say with some of the new monies that we got, and so sort of special education money, EL or whatever, had we not gotten those monies that we maybe would have needed to make different cuts in the special ed and the EL funding? I mean, there are some rumors about special ed funding coming. Would we have to cut more had we not gotten some of that money from the state?
Yes, not necessarily in special education,
Okay.
yes, we would have. So that for those in the audience, the special ed excess cost aid is that we do not receive fully reimbursed for our expenses as they relate to special education students. We get general education funds for them, but there are additional costs on top of that, and we do not get fully funded for that. So this year was the first year that we got some additional, not fully funded, to cover those costs, which, reminder, that has been part of the general fund, and the general fund has paid for that for many years. So it's not as if we're going to add 4.4 million in special ed costs to compensate for that. It's just making up for what we've been spending out of the general fund. Now, we do have some additional special ed costs. We always do because we have different student needs and more student special ed populations. So
that does help, and thank you again. Every time we have this conversation, right, we learn more and ask more questions. And so I'm going to switch gears just a tiny bit. And we started our afternoon with our peer coaches talking about how they faced some pretty significant cuts last year and are doing it again. Yet they were given some support and some flexibility to innovate, and they worked with their principals and their departments to do some really great work for students, despite everyone acknowledging that it's been hard. And so I guess for Dr. Anderson and teaching and learning, I'm wondering about, if this budget passes and we move forward, we know that buildings and departments and teachers are going to be strained a bit. But what ways are we prepared to have communication lines with principals and teachers and district administration to make sure that we're still meeting the needs of our students, and to make sure that we're allowing teachers to be as innovative and as student focused as they can be?
Well, I'll start with that one, Dana. I'll share a few additional comments as well, but I think tight alignment between teaching and learning and principals is going to be really critical for ongoing, so that there's a good flow of information and communication to make sure that principals have a good understanding about what they're hearing from teachers and what their needs are, and that principals and Plansburg, who was unable to be here tonight, is able to work closely with principals and teaching and learning to help make sure that there can be a smooth delivery of programming and ensuring that we do everything that we can given circumstances. So I think communication will be really important. Systems such as our student count program that we have in place will be really
ensure that those who are deployed as interventionists or specialists in one degree or another within our elementary, middle, and high school programming, we're maximizing the effectiveness and efficiency of those staff members as well. And just really looking at solid team effort to help ensure that we provide everything and given the resources that we have and the changes of modifications that have been made. And I know that you heard a number of presentations as a point person, Dr. Landsberg speaking about some of the new alignment we're doing with principal supervision and evaluation of the CEL program. And doing everything that we can within the buildings to strengthen classroom instruction, again, to further maximize results right within the classroom with the classroom teacher and working in tandem with the other supports that are in place, either through teaching and learning or other intervention approaches, working closely with special education to maximize that in-class experience to maybe offset a little bit some of the need to pull students out and provide services when that happens. There's that more instruction missed within the classroom, and that can be a challenge for some students. So I would just say that we'll continue to look for other ways to deliver excellence in the best possible way. Certainly we're challenged financially right now for all the reasons that I think all of the room are pretty well versed on. But that doesn't mean that we're going to minimize our striving for excellence to the best degree possible. So Dana, you may have some additional thoughts to share.
Sure. I think, one thing we heard at the PLC Institute today also is that it's systems work. And so we have a really strong system in Wayzata. We have amazing teachers, families, heard about family support. So that's not changing. And sometimes those systems then have an opportunity here to be better aligned, to get tighter, to look at ways we do things. And so the MTSS work that we've talked about here has really been a way to look at how we're delivering instruction and how we're supporting teachers and our students. And I think that wraps tightly with the CEL as Dr. Anderson alluded to. So building that model, we're using some of those extra dollars to look at instructional coach model to see how we support students in the classroom and then for teachers, a different model that may ultimately provide a better experience for our learners, but also create savings first and build the capacity of others too. So we're constantly evaluating systems to see if there's a way that we can build that collective evidence. So that's what needs to be built. So again, really leaning into research and say, what do we know when we move the bill and the way that we can do that and make sure we're just fully capitalizing these opportunities to do that. But again, just as we're out of those segments, let's just continue to really be impressed with the staff that we draw and hire. And we just continually humble and it makes our department how they figure out ways to do it. Energy, for example, today at that conference showed that they're excited about that PLC work and they've embraced how can we do this collectively, and when we're working collectively, we're working smarter, we're getting more out of it. So remain optimistic that we'll continue to deliver the excellence.
Yeah, maybe just a couple general comments. So you've heard me provide overviews in several board meetings before this one and in communications, including those that are in the packet today. But when we consider the big scheme of things, so you've seen a number of different categorical areas. So 4% on the formula is higher than what we've experienced as an average over the last several years. So we're appreciative of that. 2% in the second year is problematic. And I say that because when you look at the fact that our transportation will go up 7% in the coming year, that doesn't match well. It kind of goes to what Scott said before. We can't raise the prices of our products and services to accommodate for increased costs and expenditures. And that's a real challenge for us. We can only control one side of the accounting balance sheet as expenditures. Revenues are whatever the state determines and what come our way, or that is packaged within. Unfortunately, we have the cap of our local operating levy, voter approved levy, which is tremendously helpful. The federal grants and monies are relatively small in the big scheme of things, as you might recall, having seen from that pie graph that Edie showed us before. And, when you consider not only 7% on transportation, but we're looking at health insurance costs for the coming year of 7%. We got that down from 19%, and that's what the health insurance companies were asking, 19% increase. Matched up against a 4% increase on the funding. Makes no sense. We got it down to 7%, and we feel good about that, but that's still a -3. So I'm sharing some of these things just to reinforce the challenge that we have, and we can't all of a sudden say, well, we're gonna increase the cost of our tuition for the school district by 8% next year in order to accommodate these costs that we have no control over. And we're coming out of a very challenging financial situation. And I think there's been a little bit of a lost focus or perspective on how damaging COVID was financially to organizations like ours. You've also heard me share that organizations like ours, where there's a growing school district, that was really helpful in the good years, and it was devastating in 2021, as Dee mentioned, because we planned on those kids. COVID, of course, chose the worst possible time to settle in, right during staffing time. And we got the final direction for what the 2021 school year would look like on about July, I don't remember the exact date, 25th, I'll just say. It was within about there was a week left of July. Probably about 3 weeks before our new teachers report for the school year for in-service training. And it was actually the final marching orders with some of the mitigation strategies, and for some of our community members, some of our parents with kids in the district, realizing we'd be going to hybrid learning to accommodate social distancing and having masking guidelines and regulations. Not everybody wanted to be a part of that, so they sought options, and shared a number of times we lost about 200 students. And we had about a 10 or 12 year track record of going up by 200 kids approximately per year or more, 250 in some years. And then that didn't happen. None of us had a script or a game plan from experience about how to navigate an international pandemic. We just didn't have it. We didn't know, what the fall was going to look like. We did the best we could with the information that we had. That really, if you remember that bar graph that Dee showed where the student numbers were down in those 2 years, if you circle that, that's the primary reason that we're even having this conversation. If you take COVID out of the picture, I think we'd be having a whole different perspective and a whole different picture. There were a lot of other requirements that were implemented from the state or the feds that we were expecting to follow. And I won't go through all those because it's kind of old news at this point, but a lot of complicating factors for public school districts that really established a tough hole to dig out of. And again, because we have been a growing school district, we got a double whammy for those districts that were stable and kind of had the same number year after year. They wouldn't have planned for that 250 kids. We had to be ready for them to show up because that's how it had been for 10, 15 years. And when they didn't show up, there was less mobility. So I just share all that to kind of again set the tone as to why we are here. This is, it's really a hard time financially, and that can go without saying, obviously, for our school district. None of us want to be where we're at right now. And I know it's disappointing to all of us that we have to make some of these difficult decisions. But if we don't take care of the long-term sustainability and viability and strength and stability of the school district, it's just a kicking of the can down the road, and it'll be more painful later. Now I say all that because, I kind of use a metaphor oftentimes. It's sort of the mothership. We fly this plane. We monitor the gauges all the time, and we're always trying to look for ways to enhance or make things better given the circumstances. And we'll keep doing that through the summer. We'll continue to monitor enrollment. When we get into the school year, we'll do our best to tweak what we've implemented and try to make it better. And we'll give reconsideration to what we can for the 24-25 school year. It's premature today to say what that might look like because we don't know. We haven't for a few days yet
fully closed out on this fiscal year, and then we started new one on July 1st. As board members are well aware, and staff, we need to, by state law, establish a board approved public school budget by July 1st. So in other words, by no later than midnight, June 30th. So what you're going to be taking action on is a budget, and it's outlined and all positions for the coming school year. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's locked in stone in regard to exactly how it will unroll. But given our best projections and our finance team that's worked tirelessly the last several months trying to put this together, given our best crystal ball and perspective, numbers that are reflective of what you will take action on tonight will position us in a way that Dee Dee and her team have outlined tonight, not only this year, but into next year, and with the intent and hopefully beyond, where we're going to be able to get the wings level and have the kind of stability that we really want within our school district. So as difficult as it is, this is the situation that we're in, and we need to plan our best to move forward and monitor and adjust the best we can along the way to help ensure that we deliver the best possible program for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Board comments. We will, this is our last agenda item from the work session, and moves directly into a special. The special meeting will be asked by roll call vote to approve the budget, as we are statutorily obligated to do. By Friday night at 11:59. So here's our chance to continue to get, of course, there'll be a motion and stepping allow some conversation, but this is really your time to have the conversation. So is there any other question? What else do you need to know? I'm gonna finish my sentence and then you can. So at this moment, colleagues, I'm gonna ask that you think about anything else that any other questions that you have, any information. I want to thank you for asking all the questions that you have. The listening public can be assured that we've asked questions at all hours of the day or night, and our finance team will attest to that as well, as will their inboxes. So I hear that Millen has a statement to make, but just want to make sure that we all have that opportunity one more time. Thank you, Millen.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure that this room, everybody in this room understands that the question I asked you earlier was not in any way to be interpreted as me trying to have a zero fund balance. My only question, my question was basically regarding what the state does when there is a deficit. The state allows us to go to zero fund balance by cost cutting. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Anything else? Hearing none, this concludes our agenda for the work session of Monday, June 26, 2023. And the Wayzata Public Schools Board of Education work session is adjourned.